She tried to hide the injury. The Mafia boss noticed and took an unexpected action. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was a busy Thursday evening at the upscale restaurant in downtown Manhattan, the kind of place where suits and dresses glimmer under the soft golden light, and the air is thick with the scent of fine wine and luxury. The rich, the powerful, and the influential all gathered in this lavish setting. But for Emily, the waitress, it was just another shift. She had learned to fade into the background, to be invisible, like a ghost in a world that didn't care about her existence. As she moved from table to table, her mind kept returning to the pain in her side. She had fallen earlier that day while running errands, a misstep that caused her to twist her ankle and scrape her ribs. She knew she should have gone to the doctor, but she couldn't afford to miss work. She couldn't afford to be seen as weak. The dinner rush had started, and Emily did her best to push through the pain. She adjusted the strap of her apron, kept her posture straight, and smiled at every table, as if everything was fine. But deep inside, the injury was beginning to take its toll. Her side ached with every step, and the bruising on her ribcage was starting to darken, making it hard to breathe. But Emily didn't dare slow down. Not here, not with these people. Not with the rich guests who came for an evening of indulgence, expecting nothing less than perfection from the staff. She couldn't afford to show weakness. That's when she saw him. Dominic, the Mafia boss, the man who ran half of New York's underground world, the man whose reputation preceded him like a storm. He was sitting at a corner table, his usual entourage surrounding him, but his presence alone was enough to make the entire room shift. He wore a tailored black suit, his dark hair neatly styled, and his eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the room as he casually sipped his wine. Emily had seen him a few times before, but tonight, there was something different. He was watching her. It wasn't the kind of gaze that made you feel special. It was the kind of gaze that made you feel like he was seeing straight through you, evaluating every detail, every movement. She tried to shake off the feeling, focusing instead on her work, but when she reached his table to refill his wine glass, her hand trembled slightly. It was then that Dominic's gaze locked onto her. He didn't smile. He didn't say a word. He just watched her with those piercing eyes, as if he knew something was wrong. The pain in her side was unbearable now, but Emily forced herself to smile and refill his glass. As she pulled away, she heard his low voice, laced with authority, "You're hurt." Emily froze. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. But no, his eyes were still on her, his gaze unwavering. She tried to brush it off, but the pain was too much to hide. She could feel the blood rushing to her cheeks in embarrassment, and she cursed herself for letting him see. "I'm fine," she said quickly, forcing her voice to remain steady. Dominic raised an eyebrow. He didn't believe her. "You don't look fine," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Sit down." Emily hesitated. There was no way she could sit down. Not with him, not in front of all these people. But his commanding tone left her no choice. She reluctantly lowered herself into the chair across from him, trying not to wince as she did. "What happened?" he asked, his eyes still locked on hers. Emily glanced around the table, trying to gauge the situation. His associates were all focused on their own conversations, oblivious to what was happening. She sighed, trying to ignore the pain as she responded, "It's nothing, really. I just twisted my ankle earlier. I'll be fine." Dominic studied her for a moment, as if weighing her words. Then, without a word, he stood up, his imposing figure towering over her. "Wait here," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Emily watched in disbelief as he walked to the back of the restaurant, his bodyguards in tow. Moments later, he returned, carrying a first aid kit. He knelt down in front of her without saying a word and gently began to tend to her injury. Emily was stunned. She had expected him to ignore her, maybe even belittle her for showing weakness, but instead, he was doing the opposite. The man who had made a name for himself by commanding fear, by ruling with an iron fist, was showing her kindness. She couldn't understand it. She didn't know why he cared, but for the first time in hours, she allowed herself to relax, just a little. He finished wrapping her injury and looked up at her with a seriousness in his gaze. "You're not going back to work tonight," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Emily opened her mouth to protest, but he raised a hand to stop her. "I'll make sure you get home safely. You're done for tonight." She wanted to argue, but the pain in her side was becoming unbearable again, and the last thing she wanted was to make him angry. So, she nodded, reluctantly accepting his help. As he called for his car to take her home, Emily couldn't help but wonder what had just happened. The Mafia boss, a man who had the power to destroy lives with a single word, had just taken an unexpected action that would change her life forever. Emily sat in the back of the sleek black car, the soft hum of the engine the only sound between her and the Mafia boss. She stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, her mind racing. It didn't feel real. A few hours ago, she had been working her usual shift, trying to ignore the pain, the exhaustion, the quiet despair that came from being invisible. Now, she was sitting in a car with Dominic, the man whose name struck fear into the hearts of everyone in New York. She glanced at him, his profile sharp and composed, as he stared out of the window, seemingly lost in thought. She wanted to ask why he was helping her, why he was so different from the cold, ruthless man she had imagined. But the words didn't come. What could she say? "Thank you for noticing my injury? Thank you for caring when no one else did?" It felt like too much to say, and yet she felt like she had to say something. She looked down at the bandage he had carefully applied to her injury earlier. He had been surprisingly gentle, not the monster she had expected, but someone entirely different. She didn't understand it, and that scared her more than anything. As the car pulled up to her small apartment building, Dominic turned to her, his dark eyes meeting hers. "We're here. I'll have someone check on you tomorrow to make sure you're okay." His voice was calm, almost detached, but there was something in it that made her feel protected. She nodded, too stunned to speak. She had expected him to drop her off and walk away, as if she was just another person he had helped. But that wasn't what happened. He didn't leave. Instead, he sat in the car, his gaze fixed on her, waiting for her to speak. She felt the weight of his presence, but this time, it wasn't oppressive. It was caring? She wasn't sure. "Are you sure you don't need anything?" he asked. His voice was soft, almost like he was trying to coax her into talking. She shook her head, her throat tight. "I'm fine. Just tired." She didn't want to admit that she wasn't fine, that she was exhausted, emotionally drained, and afraid. She wanted to tell him everything, about the fall, about her past, about the pain she had carried for so long, but she couldn't. Not yet. Dominic didn't press her. Instead, he watched her with a look that made her feel like he understood, even though she had said nothing. After a long pause, he spoke again. "You don't have to do this alone." The words hit her like a wave, unexpected and overwhelming. She had always done everything on her own. She had learned to keep her head down, to stay invisible, to avoid drawing attention to herself. But Dominic's words made her realize that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to do it alone anymore. She looked at him, the man who held the power to destroy anyone who crossed him, and felt something stir inside her. She wasn't sure what it was, but it was there. A flicker of hope. Dominic broke the silence. "Get some rest. I'll have my people check on you tomorrow. I want you to be safe." With that, he reached for the door handle and stepped out of the car. Emily watched as he walked away, his tall figure disappearing into the night. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely alone. But she didn't know what to make of this strange new feeling, this connection that had been forged in the most unexpected of circumstances. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. She couldn't quite put it into words, but she knew that her life had changed in some way. She didn't know what the future held, or what Dominic Valini's role in her life would be, but she couldn't deny that he had seen her. He had noticed her pain, and in doing so, he had done something no one else ever had. He had cared, and in that moment, Emily knew that whatever came next, she would never be the same. The next morning, Emily awoke to the soft light streaming through her bedroom window. For a moment, she forgot where she was. It wasn't until she felt the lingering pain in her side that the events of the previous night came rushing back. Dominic Valini. She blinked and rubbed her eyes, trying to make sense of everything. Why had he done that? Why had he helped her? Why had he cared? She couldn't stop thinking about how he had treated her with such unexpected kindness. He had seen through the mask she wore every day, the one she used to hide her weakness, her vulnerability. And for the first time in a long time, someone had stepped in. The phone on her nightstand buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. She picked it up, expecting it to be a reminder about work, but it wasn't. It was a text from an unknown number. I hope you're feeling better. My team will check on you shortly. Stay safe. Dominic. She stared at the message for a moment, unsure of what to make of it. It was so unexpected. A mafia boss, someone who was known for being cold and calculating, was checking on her, making sure she was okay. It didn't make sense. Emily put the phone down and slowly got out of bed, trying to stretch out the stiffness in her. Sighed. The pain had subsided somewhat, but it was still there. She moved to the small kitchen in her apartment, poured herself a cup of coffee, and sat down at the table. As she sipped the hot liquid, her mind wandered back to Dominic. What did he want from her? Was this just some kind of charity to him? Or was there something more to it? She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away. She couldn't afford to get lost in them. She had to focus on getting better, getting back to work. But as much as she tried to focus on the mundane details of her life, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. This time it was a call. She glanced at the screen. It was an unfamiliar number. Hesitantly, she answered. Hello. Emily, it's Marco. I work with Dominic. We're on our way to check on you. Just wanted to make sure everything's all right. Emily's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Dominic's name. Yes. I'm fine. Really. Thank you. Good to hear, Marco said, his voice warm and reassuring. Dominic wants to make sure you're safe and comfortable. He takes care of his people, you know? Emily didn't know what to say. She didn't feel like she was his people. She was just a waitress, someone who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But something about Marco's voice made her feel like she mattered, even if just for a moment. I appreciate it, Emily said, trying to sound composed. Really? But I'm fine. You don't have to. Marco interrupted her gently. Don't worry about it. We'll be there in about 20 minutes. Just relax. The line went quiet for a moment, and then Marco added, By the way, Dominic said if you need anything, you can reach out to him directly. The words caught her off guard. She didn't know what to think. She had no idea what she would need from Dominic Valeni, but the offer lingered in her mind. Okay, thank you, Emily said, her voice soft. After a few more pleasantries, Marco ended the call, and Emily was left standing in the middle of her small apartment, still trying to process everything. A part of her wanted to laugh, to brush off the strange turn her life had taken. But another part of her, the part that had been ignored for so long, felt something else. Hope. The kind of hope that comes from knowing that maybe, just maybe, someone cares. She glanced at the clock. It had been about 10 minutes since the call, and her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Emily opened it slowly, unsure of what to expect. Standing there were two men, dressed in suits that could have cost more than her entire apartment. They were both imposing figures, but their expressions were surprisingly kind. Miss Emily, one of them asked, his voice respectful. We're here to check on you, as per Mr. Valeni's instructions. Emily stepped back, motioning for them to come in. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but this wasn't it. The two men were courteous and efficient, checking on her injury and making sure she had everything she needed. They even brought her groceries, a strange but thoughtful gesture. As they prepared to leave, one of them turned to her. Mr. Valeni wanted you to know that you're safe. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Emily nodded, still in disbelief. She had never felt so cared for by someone who barely knew her. As the door closed behind them, she sat down on her couch, trying to process everything. The mafia boss, the powerful man who ruled the city's underworld, had gone out of his way to make sure she was okay. It didn't make sense. But as she thought about it, she realized one thing. Her life was no longer the same. Dominic Valeni had seen her, and that had changed everything. The following week, Emily's life had begun to settle into a strange, new normal. She had taken the rest of the week off from work to fully rest her injury, and Dominic's team continued to check on her daily. At first, she had felt embarrassed by the attention, the care she had never known from anyone outside of her family. But with each visit, each message from Dominic, she began to realize that this wasn't just some passing act of kindness. It was genuine, and that terrified her. What was he expecting in return? Every time she thought about reaching out to him, she hesitated. What could she possibly say to a man like him? Someone whose life was so far removed from hers. She had been trained her whole life to stay invisible, to blend in and make sure no one noticed her. But Dominic wasn't like the others. He had seen her, not just the waitress behind the apron, but the woman who had been hiding behind the facade of strength for far too long. It was overwhelming. One afternoon, as Emily sat on her couch nursing a cup of tea, her phone rang. The name on the screen made her heart skip. It was Dominic. She hesitated for only a second before answering. "Hello, Emily." His voice came through smooth and calm, as always. "How are you feeling today?" She sighed, leaning back into the couch, looking out the window. "Better. The pain's almost gone. But I still don't understand why you're doing this." There was a pause on the other end, a small silence that lingered before he responded. "Because you matter." The words were simple, yet they hit her harder than anything she could have expected. She had never heard anyone say that to her before. Not like that. Not with sincerity. "You don't owe me anything," Dominic continued. "But I need to make sure you're all right. You're not just another employee, Emily. You're someone I care about." She bit her lip, trying to hold back the sudden rush of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. "But I don't belong in your world," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "You've helped me, and I don't even know why. I don't know what you want from me." She heard him exhale on the other end, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. "I don't want anything from you, Emily. What I want is for you to stop hiding. You've been carrying everything on your own for too long. You don't have to anymore." His words echoed in her mind as she sat in silence, processing them. She wasn't sure what to make of it. She had never let anyone in, never allowed anyone to see the cracks in her armor. And now, Dominic was offering something she wasn't sure she deserved. But it was tempting. So tempting. "I don't know if I can," she finally admitted, her voice small. "I've spent my whole life pretending I'm okay, pretending I can handle everything. But I don't know how to stop." There was another pause, and when Dominic spoke again, there was a weight to his words. "You don't have to stop pretending with me. You don't have to be anything other than yourself. And if you need help, if you need someone to stand by you, I'll be there." Emily closed her eyes, feeling the tears that had been threatening to fall finally spill over. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed by the vulnerability she had allowed herself to show. But Dominic's next words were a balm to her soul. "I'm not asking for anything, Emily. I just want you to know that you're not alone. You never have to be again." It felt like a promise, a weight lifted off her chest, even though she wasn't sure what it meant yet. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "You don't have to thank me," Dominic replied, his tone gentle. "Just remember, you matter. And when you're ready, when you decide you need something, don't hesitate to reach out." The call ended shortly after, but Emily sat there for a long time, staring at her phone. She had never allowed herself to trust anyone so completely, not after everything she had been through. But Dominic's words felt different. They felt like a lifeline, something real in a world that often felt cold and unforgiving. She didn't know what was coming next, but for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could let someone in. Later that evening, Emily sat at her small kitchen table, her phone in front of her. She had been staring at the screen for what felt like hours, unsure of what to do. But as the minutes ticked by, she realized something. Dominic had said it was okay to reach out when she was ready. And for the first time in a long time, she felt ready. She tapped out a simple message, her fingers trembling as she pressed send. "I think I'm ready." It didn't take long for him to reply. The message was short, but it was all she needed to hear. "I'm here when you need me." The days that followed were a blur for Emily. She found herself caught between the weight of the past and the unexpected kindness that Dominic had shown her. His words echoed in her mind constantly. "You matter." It was a concept she had never really allowed herself to believe. Life had taught her to take care of herself, to rely on no one but her own two hands. But now, in this strange new world she was stepping into, she found herself questioning everything. It had been almost a week since that phone call. She had been receiving daily check-ins from Dominic's team, each one offering support, but nothing prepared her for the text she received one evening. It was simple: "Meet me tomorrow. I'll be at the usual place." She knew exactly what he meant. The restaurant, the one where she had worked for years, the place that had always felt like a cage. She hesitated for a moment, unsure whether she was ready to face him again, to face the man who had begun to dismantle the walls she had so carefully built around herself. But she couldn't ignore it. She couldn't ignore the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this was the moment that would change everything. The next day, Emily arrived early at the restaurant, her nerves bubbling beneath the surface. She hadn't been back since her injury, and the place seemed different now. The familiar clink of silverware, the hum of conversation, the sense of chaos that came with the dinner rush, it all felt distant. And there, at a corner table, sat Dominic. His presence was as commanding as ever, but there was a softness to him that Emily hadn't noticed before. As she walked over to him, he stood and gave her a nod, his eyes soft but serious. "I'm glad you came," he said, his voice low but warm. She couldn't help but feel a small sense of relief wash over her. She had expected the usual cold demeanor, the unapproachable man she had seen in the public eye. But this was different. "I wasn't sure if I should," Emily admitted, her voice quiet. "I don't want to burden you, Dominic. You've already done so much for me." He smiled faintly, but there was no mockery in it, only understanding. "You're not a burden, Emily. I told you you matter. And I meant it." He motioned for her to sit, and she did, feeling an odd mix of comfort and unease. There was a brief pause, the weight of the unspoken between them hanging in the air. Finally, Dominic spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "I want you to stop hiding." Emily blinked, caught off guard by his words. "What do you mean?" she asked, her throat tightening. "You've spent your life hiding, haven't you? Hiding behind that smile, that mask that makes people think you're fine, when you're not. You don't have to do that anymore." His words struck her like a punch, but they weren't cruel. There was no judgment in his tone, just a quiet, unwavering truth. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. She had always thought she was good at hiding, good at pretending. But the reality of it all hit her in that moment. "I know it's not easy," Dominic continued, his gaze softening. "But you deserve more than this. You deserve to be seen for who you are, not for what people think you should be." Emily felt the walls around her crumble. She had never allowed herself to be seen, not fully. But here, in this moment, Dominic wasn't looking at her like a waitress or a person of little consequence. He was seeing her, and that terrified her. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why me?" Dominic's gaze never wavered. "Because I know what it feels like to be invisible, to live in the shadows, to pretend that everything's okay when it's not. I don't want that for you." She felt her chest tighten at his words, the tears she had been holding back threatening to spill. She had spent so long pretending she was fine, convincing herself that no one cared enough to look beneath the surface. But Dominic had looked. He had seen her in a way no one else ever had. "I'm scared," she admitted, the vulnerability in her voice raw and real. "I don't know how to stop pretending. I don't know what to do." Dominic reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. The touch was steady, comforting. "You don't have to do it alone. Let me help you." For the first time in a long while, Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She didn't know what the future held, or where this strange connection with Dominic would lead, but in that moment, she knew one thing. She didn't have to hide anymore. And maybe, just maybe, she could start to believe that she mattered. As they sat there, the world around them continued on as usual. But for Emily, everything had changed. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was seen. And for the first time in her life, that was enough. The following days after their conversation at the restaurant felt like a dream to Emily. She went back to work, but everything had changed. Her routine, once marked by the heavy weight of invisibility, now felt different. Dominic's words continued to echo in her mind. "You deserve to be seen." For the first time in years, she found herself truly questioning her existence, not in a way that was painful, but in a way that felt liberating. It was as if she had been given a new lens through which to view the world. She didn't have to be invisible anymore. Every day, she would wake up to check her phone and find a simple message from Dominic. Sometimes it was a text asking how she was feeling, other times it was just a short note reminding her to take care of herself. His presence in her life, though quiet, had become a steady source of comfort. But Emily still couldn't shake the fear that came with it. The fear that maybe she wasn't enough for someone like Dominic. The fear that maybe, in the end, this was all just a kind act from a man who had a soft spot for the people he employed. But that fear was slowly starting to fade. One evening, Dominic texted her again, this time with an invitation. Come to dinner with me tomorrow night. I want you to meet someone important to me. Emily stared at the screen for a moment. She felt a knot in her stomach. What was this? Was this another sign that things were changing, or was it simply another chance for him to show her how different their worlds were? She hesitated, but after a moment, she responded. Okay, where? He replied almost instantly. The usual place. I'll pick you up. The next evening, Emily found herself standing in front of her apartment building, dressed in the nicest clothes she owned. The soft black dress fit her comfortably, but she couldn't help but feel out of place. She wasn't used to dressing up like this, not for something that wasn't work-related. But there she was, waiting for the man who had already shown her more kindness than she had ever received in her life. A sleek black car pulled up in front of her, and the window rolled down. Dominic's familiar gaze met hers. You look stunning, he said with a small smile. She couldn't help but blush. She wasn't used to compliments, especially not ones that felt so genuine. Thank you, she said softly as she climbed into the car. As the car drove through the city streets, Emily couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Where were they going? What was this about? The usual place, he had said, but it didn't ease her anxiety. The car finally came to a stop in front of a beautiful, upscale restaurant she had never seen before. It was grand, with large windows and a stunning view of the city skyline. The kind of place that people only visited for special occasions. She looked over at Dominic, who seemed completely at ease as he got out of the car and held the door open for her. This place looks amazing, she whispered. He gave her a small smile. It's one of my favorite spots, he said, his voice low. And tonight, I want you to enjoy it as much as I do. Emily nodded, stepping out of the car, trying to keep her composure. They walked inside together, and as they entered the private dining room, she saw that it wasn't just the two of them. At the table, a man and a woman were already seated, both of whom looked to be in their mid-40s. They were dressed impeccably, and their air of confidence made Emily feel like an outsider. Emily, this is my brother, Alex, and his wife, Isabella, Dominic introduced her. They've been waiting for us. Emily nodded politely, her nerves spiking. What was this dinner really about? She took a seat next to Dominic, trying to focus on the conversation that was unfolding. The small talk was pleasant enough, but Emily couldn't help but feel like she was on display. Dominic's family was kind, but there was an underlying tension in the air, as if they were sizing her up. They spoke about business and life, and Emily found herself listening more than speaking. Every now and then, she would catch Dominic's eye, and he would give her a reassuring smile, as if to tell her everything was fine. But the unease she felt remained. As dinner continued, the conversation turned to more personal matters. Alex and Isabella began to ask Emily questions about her life, her past, and her future. At first, she was hesitant, not sure how much to share. But there was something about Dominic's family that made her feel like she could open up. She spoke about her childhood, her struggles, and her dreams for the future. The more she spoke, the more she realized just how much she had been holding back, not just from Dominic, but from herself. It felt like a release, like a burden being lifted off her shoulders. By the time dessert was served, Emily felt more at ease than she had in a long time. Dominic's family may have been intimidating at first, but they were kind and genuinely interested in her. The dinner, once filled with uncertainty, had transformed into a moment of connection. As the evening came to a close, Dominic walked her back to the car, his hand resting lightly on her back. You did great, he said with a smile. Emily turned to look at him, her heart beating a little faster. Thank you for tonight. I didn't expect it to be like this. He gave her a knowing look. I wanted you to see that you belong, not just in my world, but in any world you choose. She felt a warmth in her chest at his words. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to fall into place. She wasn't invisible anymore. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The weeks following their dinner together felt like a turning point for Emily. She was beginning to allow herself to believe that the kindness Dominic had shown her wasn't some fleeting gesture. It was real, and for the first time, someone cared enough to see her, truly see her. The relationship that had started with a simple act of compassion was beginning to take a deeper, more complicated turn. They spoke often, more than just casual check-ins. Dominic seemed to genuinely want to know about her life, her past, her dreams. Emily found herself opening up in ways she never had before. She told him about her childhood, the struggles her family faced, the sacrifices they had made to survive. She shared how she had always felt the need to be strong, to never show any weakness, because that's what life had demanded of her. Dominic listened with a quiet intensity, never interrupting, never judging. His presence was a constant reminder that she wasn't as invisible as she had always believed. But even with this new sense of connection, there was a part of her that held back. Emily wasn't sure where this relationship with Dominic was going. He had shown her nothing but kindness, but his world was so different from hers. He was a man of power, someone who commanded respect and fear, while she was a woman who had spent most of her life blending into the background, unnoticed. One evening, as Emily sat on her balcony, sipping her tea and thinking about the complexities of her situation, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Dominic. "I need to talk to you. Come by the office tomorrow, around 3. The message was brief, but there was something in the way it was written that made her nervous. She had never been to his office, never seen where he worked, and she had no idea what he wanted to talk about. She hesitated, her mind running through possibilities. Was he about to end their connection? Had he changed his mind about helping her? But then, she remembered his words from their dinner together. "You belong, not just in my world, but in any world you choose." Maybe he was just trying to help her find a path, a way out of the life she had been stuck in for so long. The next afternoon, Emily stood in front of the tall, glass building that housed Dominic's office. She had never been here before, but now it felt like she was about to step into a world she had only ever seen from the outside. She was nervous, but determined. She took a deep breath and walked through the door, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The lobby was grand, with sleek modern furnishings and high ceilings. She felt out of place, like she didn't belong in this pristine, polished environment. But as she approached the elevator, she saw a familiar face. Marco, one of Dominic's associates, was waiting for her. He gave her a polite smile and gestured for her to follow him. "Mr. Valenti is expecting you," he said as he led her to the elevator. Emily's heart raced as the elevator doors closed, the soft hum of the ride doing little to ease her nerves. What was this about? Why had Dominic asked her to come here? The elevator stopped on the top floor, and Marco led her down a long hallway to a door at the end. He knocked once before opening it. "Miss Emily is here, sir," Marco announced before stepping back. Emily stepped inside, her eyes immediately locking onto Dominic. He was standing by the window, his back to her, looking out over the city. The sight of him took her breath away. He looked so different in this setting, the powerful man who commanded attention now appearing almost vulnerable in the quiet of his office. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Emily," he said, his voice steady. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, unsure of what to say. She had expected a cold, formal conversation, but instead, she was greeted with warmth. He gestured to the seat in front of his desk. "Please sit." She did, feeling both nervous and oddly at ease in his presence. He studied her for a moment before speaking again. "I've been thinking a lot about you, about what I can do to help you." Emily blinked, unsure where this conversation was going. "I've been where you are," Dominic continued, his tone more serious now. "I know what it's like to feel trapped, to feel like you don't have a way out. I've seen the way you've been struggling, and I want to offer you a way forward." He paused, as if searching for the right words. "I know this is sudden, but I want to offer you a position. Something more than just a job. A chance to build something for yourself, to leave behind the life you've been living." Emily stared at him, stunned by his words. A chance to leave everything behind. A chance to start over? She wasn't sure she understood what he meant. "What kind of position?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic leaned forward slightly, his eyes intense. "I want you to work with me, with my team. Not as a waitress, not as someone invisible. I want you to be part of something bigger, to have a real future." The offer hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Emily didn't know what to say. She had never imagined anything like this for herself. She had always assumed she would be stuck in the same cycle, working endless shifts just to survive. But Dominic was offering her something different, something real. The weight of his words pressed down on her, and for the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of possibility. "I don't know if I can," she said softly. "I don't know what this world is, Dominic. I'm not sure I'm ready for it." He smiled, a small, reassuring smile. You don't have to be ready. You don't have to do it alone. I'll help you. Emily took a deep breath, her mind racing. This was the moment that could change everything. She had always believed she was stuck, trapped in a life that didn't offer any real future. But now, standing in front of Dominic, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she had a chance to make something of herself. Okay, she whispered. I'll do it. The days following Emily's decision to accept Dominic's offer felt like a whirlwind. She had never imagined herself stepping into this world, a world of power, influence, and danger. Yet here she was, at the edge of something she couldn't fully grasp. She was still trying to process everything when Dominic's team arrived at her apartment one afternoon. They were there to take her to her new role. The car ride was quiet, with Marco, one of Dominic's trusted associates, sitting beside her. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. The city passed by in a blur, the buildings towering above her, reflecting the new world she was about to enter. She had no idea what to expect, but there was no turning back now. When they arrived at the office, Emily was led to a sleek, modern building in the heart of the city. It was intimidating, to say the least. The lobby was filled with high-end furniture, polished marble floors, and people who moved with purpose. She felt out of place, but Marco's reassuring presence at her side helped ease her nerves. You'll be fine, he said as they entered the elevator. Dominic believes in you. The words should have comforted her, but they only made her feel more uncertain. What did Dominic see in her? What was it that made him think she could handle this world? The elevator doors opened, and they stepped into a long, well-lit hallway. The sound of their footsteps echoed as they walked toward the office at the end of the hall. When they reached it, Marco knocked before opening the door. Miss Emily, he called, his voice calm. Dominic's expecting you. Inside, Dominic was seated behind a large desk, his back to the door. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Emily stood frozen in the doorway. Everything about this office screamed power, from the sleek furniture to the stunning view of the city skyline. Dominic motioned for her to come in and sit. You're here, he said, his voice calm, yet with an undeniable authority. Emily hesitated for a moment before walking into the room. She sat down across from him, trying to keep her nerves in check. She had no idea what was about to happen, but she knew one thing for sure. This was going to be a pivotal moment in her life. How are you feeling? Dominic asked, his voice steady but with a trace of concern. I'm fine, Emily replied, though the nervous flutter in her stomach betrayed her. She wasn't sure why he was asking. Was he testing her? Or was this just a casual question? Good, Dominic said, nodding. I'm glad you're settling in. I've been thinking about what comes next for you. He paused, watching her closely. You're not just here to be another part of the team. I want you to have a real role, one that challenges you. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what he meant by that. I've been in this business for a long time, Emily, Dominic continued, leaning forward slightly. I've seen people come and go, but what sets you apart is that you're willing to step out of your comfort zone. You're not afraid to take risks. Emily wasn't sure if he was complimenting her or just stating the obvious. She had always been afraid of not being enough, afraid of failing. But Dominic had seen something in her, something she hadn't even seen in herself. I want you to help with the next big project, he said, breaking her thoughts. It's going to be a challenge, but I think you're ready for it. Emily felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. What kind of project? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic smiled slightly, a knowing look in his eyes. A project that involves more than just business, he said cryptically. It's about influence, strategy, and making the right moves. I need someone I can trust, someone who understands what's at stake. Emily's mind raced. What was he talking about? What kind of project required all of that? And why did he think she could handle it? She wasn't some businesswoman or strategist. She was just a woman who had worked in a restaurant, who had learned to keep her head down and her mouth shut. But I don't have experience in that, Emily said, her voice hesitant. Dominic's gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw something else in his eyes, faith. You don't need to have experience, he said quietly. What matters is that you have the ability to learn, to adapt, and to make the right choices when it counts. I believe in you. The words struck her deeply. She had never had anyone believe in her like this before. It wasn't just about the job or the money. It was about someone seeing her potential and giving her the chance to prove herself. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was the opportunity she had been waiting for, the chance to step into a world she had never thought possible. "I'll do my best," she said finally, her voice more confident than she had expected. Dominic nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I know you will." As she left his office, Emily felt the weight of the moment settle on her. She wasn't sure what lay ahead, but she knew one thing. She was no longer just a waitress. She was someone who had a future, someone who had been given a chance to make something of herself. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. The next few weeks passed in a blur of new experiences for Emily. What had once been an ordinary life of working tirelessly just to make ends meet had now transformed into something she could barely recognize. Dominic had kept his word. He gave her a chance, and with each passing day, Emily found herself navigating a world that was both thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. She was learning quickly, though, more than she ever thought she could. The first project Dominic had assigned to her was one that seemed impossible at first. She was tasked with coordinating an important meeting with several influential figures. They were to discuss a new partnership that could change the landscape of Dominic's business. The pressure was immense. She wasn't used to dealing with this kind of responsibility. But Dominic had confidence in her, and that confidence was starting to fuel her own. Every night, she would review documents, make calls, and rehearse her speeches in front of a mirror. The weight of what she was doing wasn't lost on her, but it didn't scare her anymore. She was starting to feel a sense of power, a sense of control over her own destiny. It wasn't just about the project anymore. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. The day of the meeting arrived, and Emily stood in front of the conference room door, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. This was the moment that would define everything. The room was filled with the top players in the industry, each one more intimidating than the last. She had met a few of them before, but now, she was their equal. She wasn't the waitress who had served them food anymore. She was a part of this world. As she walked into the room, she could feel their eyes on her. She didn't falter. She knew she belonged. She had prepared for this moment, and she was ready. Dominic entered shortly after, his presence commanding the attention of the room. He gave Emily a small nod as he took his seat at the head of the table, and she did the same. For the next hour, they discussed strategy, business expansion, and potential risks. Emily's role was simple but crucial. She had to manage the logistics, keep the conversation flowing, and ensure that everything went smoothly. She was nervous, but with each passing minute, she became more comfortable. She was part of the team now, no longer the outsider looking in. As the meeting ended, Dominic stood up and addressed the room. "I believe we've made some great progress today," he said. "Thank you all for your time." As the others filed out of the room, Dominic turned to Emily, a satisfied smile on his face. "You did well," he said, his voice low and steady. She couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. It wasn't just about getting through the meeting. It was about how far she had come. From the woman who had been afraid to even speak her mind, to the woman who was now holding her own in front of some of the most powerful people in New York. "Thank you," she replied, her voice a little shaky with emotion. Dominic's smile softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're a natural at this, Emily. I told you you belong." In that moment, Emily realized something important. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. She was no longer the invisible woman in the background. She was someone who could stand tall, who could make a difference. And Dominic had given her the chance to prove it to herself. As the days passed, Emily's confidence grew. She took on more projects, handled more responsibility, and continued to surprise herself with how capable she was. But as much as she was beginning to believe in herself, there was still something she had to confront: her feelings for Dominic. She had been trying to ignore them, trying to focus on her work and not let her emotions complicate things. But every time they spoke, every time he looked at her with those piercing eyes, she felt something stirring inside her. She had never allowed herself to feel anything like this before. Her life had always been about survival, about getting by. She had never had the luxury of falling for someone, especially not someone like Dominic. He was powerful, dangerous, and above all, unattainable. He had given her a chance she had never thought possible. But that didn't mean he saw her as anything more than someone who worked for him. And yet, The way he treated her, the way he looked at her, made her question everything. One night, after a particularly long day at work, Emily found herself sitting in her apartment, her mind spinning. She had worked hard to get where she was, but it still didn't feel like enough. She wanted to prove herself, not just to Dominic, but to herself. But at the same time, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. She knew she couldn't ignore it forever. And just as she was trying to sort through her emotions, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Dominic. "I need to talk to you. Meet me tonight, my place. 8 p.m. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't know what this was about, but she couldn't ignore it. She wasn't sure what she was walking into, but she knew she had to face whatever it was. The drive to Dominic's penthouse was a blur. Her mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever conversation awaited her, but she couldn't back down now. When she arrived, Dominic greeted her at the door with a warm smile. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. She followed him inside, her nerves still on edge. The penthouse was as luxurious as ever, but tonight, it felt different. Tonight, it felt personal. Dominic led her to the living room, where they sat down on the couch. He turned to her, his expression serious but not cold. "I've been thinking a lot about you, Emily," he said, his voice steady. "I want you to know that you matter. More than you realize." The evening at Dominic's penthouse had shifted the dynamic between them in a way Emily hadn't expected. As she sat next to him on the couch, the tension in the room was palpable. Her heart was still racing from his words, the way he had looked at her so intently. He had always treated her with respect, but tonight, it felt different. His words about her maturing, more than she realized, had sparked something inside her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. She had spent her whole life in survival mode, constantly on guard, never truly allowing anyone to see her. But Dominic was different. He had seen her, really seen her, and it was more than just a passing glance. It felt like he had peeled away the layers she had spent years building up around herself. She wasn't sure what to do with all the emotions swirling inside her. She had always kept people at arm's length, but Dominic had a way of getting under her skin, making her want to trust him in a way she had never trusted anyone before. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost like he was choosing his words carefully. "I know this might be overwhelming," he said, his eyes steady on hers. "But I want you to understand that I'm not just offering you a job or a place in my world. I'm offering you something more. A chance to truly be seen. To stop hiding." Emily's breath caught in her throat. The words he spoke were so raw, so honest. She could feel her guard starting to come down, but she was still afraid. What if this was all just a game to him? What if, in the end, she was nothing more than a distraction, someone to help him with his plans? But the way he looked at her, like she was important, like she mattered, made her want to believe him. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I've never been good at trusting people. I've spent my whole life keeping my distance. I don't know how to let that go." Dominic's gaze softened even more, and for the first time, Emily saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "You don't have to let everything go at once," he said, his voice low and reassuring. "Trust is something that builds over time. I'm not asking you to change overnight, Emily. I'm asking you to let me help you, to let me show you that you can be more than you ever thought possible." The sincerity in his voice made her heart ache. She had never been the type to rely on anyone, and yet, in that moment, she found herself wanting to. She wanted to believe in what he was offering. She wanted to believe that there was more to life than just survival. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic reached over and gently took her hand in his. "You don't have to be ready. You just have to take the first step. The rest will follow." The simple gesture was enough to calm her nerves. She wasn't used to anyone being this patient with her, this understanding. It was so easy to push people away, to hide behind her walls, but Dominic was making it difficult to keep them up. "Okay," she said finally, her voice shaking slightly. "I'll try. I'll take the first step." Dominic's expression softened into a smile, and for a moment, everything felt right. He stood up, offering her his hand. "Come on. I've got something to show you." She followed him as he led her into another room in the penthouse. It was a large, open space, filled with books, artwork, and a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Emily stood by the window, looking out at the lights below. It was surreal. She had never imagined herself in a place like this, surrounded by such luxury, by so much success. "This is where we make the big decisions," Dominic said, walking over to a table filled with documents. "This is where I want you to be. Not just as someone who helps with the logistics, but as someone who is part of the decision-making process. Someone who has a say." Emily turned to him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You want me to be part of that?" she asked, her voice shaky. Dominic nodded, his eyes steady. "I want you to have a voice in everything we do. You've shown me that you're capable of so much more than you give yourself credit for. It's time you realize that too." The weight of his words settled over her, and for the first time, Emily didn't feel like an outsider in this world. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was part of something bigger than herself. As Dominic moved toward the desk, he gestured for her to sit. "We'll start small," he said. "But I need you to know that this is just the beginning. You're going to do great things, Emily. I believe in you." She sat down, still in shock at how quickly everything had changed. One moment, she had been just another waitress, hiding behind the anonymity of her life. The next, she was sitting in a room filled with power and opportunity, being offered a chance to prove herself in ways she had never imagined. "I don't know how to thank you," Emily said quietly, her voice full of emotion. Dominic smiled, his gaze warm. "You don't need to thank me. Just make the most of this opportunity." As the night went on, they discussed plans, ideas, and strategies, but Emily was only half listening. Her mind was still racing. She had taken the first step, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like the future was something within her reach. The days that followed were filled with a mix of excitement and uncertainty for Emily. She had taken that first step into Dominic's world, and now, it was time to prove that she could handle the responsibility he had placed on her. Every day brought new challenges, new meetings, and more decisions to make. But with each passing day, Emily felt herself growing more confident, more capable of handling the weight of the position Dominic had entrusted her with. The project that Dominic had initially assigned her was moving forward, and she was in charge of overseeing the coordination between multiple high-profile figures in the business world. At first, she had felt overwhelmed, unsure of how to navigate the complexities of the industry. But as she worked alongside Dominic's team, she began to realize that she had a natural talent for this. She had a sharp mind, a keen attention to detail, and a determination to succeed that was unmatched. Dominic's faith in her was becoming a driving force, pushing her to be better every day. As the project progressed, Emily found herself increasingly involved in meetings with Dominic, where they discussed strategy, risks, and potential partnerships. It was during these meetings that she began to understand just how much Dominic valued her opinion. He would often turn to her for input, asking her thoughts on everything from business expansion to negotiation tactics. The respect he showed her, the way he trusted her judgment, only fueled her desire to succeed. But as her role in the business grew, so did the pressure. Emily began to feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. There were moments when she doubted herself, when the thought of failing terrified her. She had never been in a position like this before, and the fear of not living up to Dominic's expectations was overwhelming. She found herself staying up late at night, reviewing contracts, making calls, and obsessing over every detail. She knew that Dominic believed in her, but there was still a voice in the back of her mind telling her that she wasn't good enough, that she didn't belong in this world. It was one of those late nights when she found herself sitting alone in Dominic's office, staring at a pile of paperwork when he walked in. He looked at her, concern etched on his face. "You've been working nonstop," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You need to take a break." Emily looked up at him, her exhaustion evident. "I can't," she replied. "There's too much to do. I don't want to mess this up." Dominic walked over to her, his expression softening. "You're not going to mess it up," he said, his tone reassuring. "You've already proven more than enough. But you need to take care of yourself. I can't have you burning out." Emily was taken aback by his words. She had always thought that in order to prove herself, she had to work harder than anyone else. She had always believed that pushing herself to the limit was the only way to earn respect. But here was Dominic, telling her that it was okay to take a step back, that her well-being mattered just as much as her work. "I'll take a break when this is over," Emily said, trying to push past her own doubts. Dominic shook his head, his eyes locking with hers. "No, you'll take care of yourself now. If you burn out, You won't be able to do any of this. You matter more than the work. Don't forget that. His words hit her harder than she expected. For so long, she had believed that her worth was tied to her productivity, to her ability to work endlessly without rest. But here was Dominic, reminding her that she was more than just the work she did. She was a person, deserving of care and rest. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice full of emotion. Dominic smiled, his usual cool demeanor softening. "Take a walk. Get some fresh air. I'll handle things here for a while." Emily nodded, still processing everything he had said. As she walked out of the office, the cool night air hit her face, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of relief. She had been running on empty for so long, constantly pushing herself to be more, to be better. But now, she realized that maybe it was okay to slow down, to take a breath and remember who she was outside of her work. The next day, Emily took Dominic's advice to heart. She made time for herself, stepping away from the office to recharge. She went for walks in the park, read books, and allowed herself to relax. It wasn't easy at first. The old habits of overworking and never feeling like she was doing enough still lingered, but with each day, she began to feel stronger, more centered. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was learning to live. And as the weeks passed, Emily's confidence grew even more. She realized that she wasn't just succeeding in Dominic's world, she was thriving. She had found her place, and with Dominic's guidance, she was starting to believe in herself in a way she never had before. But there was one more step to take. One final challenge that would define everything. It came when Dominic called her into his office one afternoon, his expression serious. "We've reached a point in the project where I need to know if you're ready to take on more responsibility," he said, his tone steady. "This is the final piece of the puzzle. If you're in, you'll be running the show. I trust you to make the right decision." Emily's heart raced as she listened to him. She had come so far, but this was different. This was the moment when everything would change. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her, but she knew that she was ready. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into this world weeks ago. She had earned her place, and now, it was time to prove that she could take on anything. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady with conviction. Dominic smiled, a look of pride in his eyes. "I knew you would be." Emily stood in front of the tall glass windows of Dominic's office, looking out at the city below. The view was breathtaking, the lights twinkling like stars, but her mind was elsewhere. The weight of the decision she had made still hung heavy on her shoulders. She had agreed to take on more responsibility, to step up and lead the next phase of the project. Dominic had put his trust in her, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. But the challenge was far from over. This next step wasn't just about proving herself to Dominic. It was about proving to herself that she could handle the pressure. She had come so far in such a short time, and now, she was on the verge of something bigger than she had ever imagined. The phone on her desk buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Dominic. "Meet me at the office tomorrow morning at 9. We have a lot to discuss." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Tomorrow. The big day? She had been working hard, staying late, making plans, and now it was time for the final push. She wasn't sure what to expect, but the anticipation was overwhelming. She had done everything she could to prepare for this moment, but she still wasn't sure if she was truly ready. The next morning, she arrived at the office early, her heart pounding in her chest. She had dressed carefully, choosing a simple yet elegant outfit that made her feel confident. As she entered the building, the usual sense of nervousness crept in, but she pushed it aside. She was ready for this. She was ready to take on the challenge. Dominic's office door was open when she arrived, and he was already sitting at his desk, reviewing documents. He looked up as she entered, his gaze warm but serious. "Good morning, Emily. You're right on time." She smiled nervously. "I'm ready." Dominic nodded, a faint smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Good. I've been watching your progress, and I'm impressed. But this is the next level. Are you sure you're ready for this?" Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I am. I've been preparing for this, and I'm ready to take the next step." Dominic studied her for a moment, then stood and walked over to the window, looking out at the city. "You know, this isn't just about making deals and growing the business. This is about power, influence, and trust. And I'm trusting you with something important." Emily felt a twinge of doubt, but she didn't let it show. I won't let you down. He turned to face her, his expression serious. I'm not worried about that. But I need to know that you can handle what's coming. This is a high-stakes game, Emily. You've seen a glimpse of what we do, but the real work comes with a price. She nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. The life she had stepped into was far from easy, and she knew that. But she also knew that she had come too far to back out now. I can handle it, she said, her voice steady. Dominic's gaze softened slightly. Good. Then let's begin. Over the next few hours, Dominic and Emily went over the details of the next phase of the project. It was big, bigger than anything Emily had ever dealt with. They discussed logistics, partnerships, and the risks involved. But more than that, Dominic was testing her. He was seeing how she reacted under pressure, how well she could think on her feet, how she would handle the responsibility. And with every question, every challenge he presented, Emily found herself rising to the occasion. She felt the weight of the decision she had made, but she also felt something else, pride. She was doing this. She was capable. By the time the meeting ended, Dominic was nodding in approval. You're ready, Emily. You've got the skills, the drive, and the vision. Now, it's time to make it happen. The words sent a surge of determination through her. She wasn't just a part of this world anymore. She was at the center of it. She was going to make a real impact. As she left Dominic's office that afternoon, her mind was racing with possibilities. The future was now hers to shape, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she had the power to do so. But with that power came a responsibility she couldn't ignore. She wasn't just working for Dominic anymore. She was working for herself. She was building something that mattered. And as she walked out into the crisp evening air, she realized that this was just the beginning. There was still so much to do, so much to prove. But now, for the first time, she believed she could do it. The world was open to her, and she wasn't going to back down. Dominic had given her the opportunity, but it was up to her to seize it. And she was ready. As Emily stood in the quiet office, the weight of the moment settled over her. It had been weeks since she had taken the first step into Dominic's world, and now, she was here, preparing for the final push. Everything had led up to this. The work, the challenges, the doubts. Everything was about to culminate in a decision that would change the course of her life. She had earned her place. She had proved to herself and to Dominic that she belonged in this world. But that realization came with a cost. The power, the respect, the success, they all came with responsibility. Dominic had shown her how to wield that power, but now, it was up to her to make her own path. She knew that. She had accepted it. And she was ready. The office buzzed with activity around her, but Emily was focused. She had a meeting with the key partners of Dominic's latest venture. The stakes were high. This was more than just a business deal. This was about securing a future, not just for Dominic, but for herself, for the people she now worked with, and for everything she had built. As she prepared for the meeting, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her here. It had started with a simple injury, something she had tried to hide. But that injury had led her to Dominic, a man whose world was vast and complicated, and who had seen something in her that no one else had. He had taken the time to teach her, to trust her, to push her to be better than she ever thought she could be. The first few days in this world had been overwhelming, to say the least. She had been unsure of herself, afraid of making mistakes. But with Dominic's guidance, she had grown stronger. She had learned to speak with authority, to think strategically, to hold her own in rooms full of powerful people. She had become more than just the waitress she once was. She had become someone with a future, someone with a purpose. As the partners arrived for the meeting, Emily stood at the front of the room, her posture straight and confident. She was no longer the outsider, the woman in the background. She was now a key player in the decisions that were being made. The conversation began, and Emily listened intently as the partners discussed the details. She didn't just sit back and observe. She engaged, offering her thoughts, asking questions, and providing input when necessary. With every passing minute, she felt more at home in this world. When the meeting came to a close, the partners shook hands and filed out of the room, leaving Emily and Dominic alone. He gave her a look of approval, his eyes softening with pride. "You did well," he said, his voice calm but full of admiration. Emily couldn't help but smile. "Thank you," she said, the words carrying more weight than they ever had before. Dominic walked over to her, standing beside her as they both looked out of the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance. "You've earned your place here, Emily. You've proven that you're more than capable of handling everything that comes your way. But remember this, no matter how much success you achieve, never forget where you came from. Never forget who you are." His words struck her deeply. She had worked so hard to leave behind the life she had known, the one where she had to fight for every ounce of respect. But Dominic was reminding her of something important. It wasn't just about the power and the success. It was about staying true to herself, no matter how high she climbed. "I won't forget," she said softly, her voice steady. "I've learned a lot, not just from you, but from this journey. I'm not the same person I was when I first walked into this world. And I'm proud of that." Dominic gave her a small smile, his eyes locking with hers. "You should be. You've come a long way." As the evening settled in, Emily felt a sense of peace that she hadn't known before. She was no longer just surviving. She was thriving. And as she looked around the office, the city lights shining through the windows, she realized that this was just the beginning. She had a future now, a future that she had built with her own hands. She had faced her fears, pushed past her limits, and proved to herself that she was capable of achieving anything she set her mind to. Dominic had given her a chance, but it was her own determination and hard work that had made her success possible. She wasn't just a part of his world anymore. She had created her own. And as the city continued to pulse outside, Emily knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The world was hers to conquer, and she wasn't afraid to take it on. She had come so far, and now she was ready for whatever came next. In this captivating journey of self-discovery and transformation, Emily's life changes dramatically when she meets a powerful and influential man, Dominic. From a humble waitress, Emily steps into a world filled with opportunities and challenges, testing her resilience and ability to rise above her fears. As she becomes more involved in Dominic's world, she navigates the complexities of trust, power, and the undeniable pull of a deepening connection. This emotional roller coaster reveals that even in the most unexpected of circumstances, people can find love, trust, and respect. As their relationship evolves, it's clear that this is no ordinary partnership. It's a story that explores not only the professional rise of a woman, but also the romantic side of her journey, blending passion and ambition. If you enjoy romance stories with powerful characters, unexpected twists, and moments of vulnerability, this narrative is for you. As Emily becomes more involved with Dominic, their journey is full of heartwarming moments, challenges, and a strong, undeniable bond. Their evolving connection challenges the conventional paths people take in life, making it one of the most memorable romance stories you'll ever read. Dive into this unforgettable narrative that showcases how love and ambition can intertwine in the most unexpected ways. These romance stories remind us that no matter where we come from or how hard life may seem, we all deserve the chance to love, grow, and be loved in return.